Social Civilization and Diagnostics with Jerusalem-based theologian Professor Abromele.
The story of Joseph is about to come to an end. A quarter of the book of Genesis has been dedicated to it. It is an incredible story. It describes Joseph becoming the viceroy of Egypt, taking over the Egyptian economy, having predicted surplus and then famine. He was able to translate his visions into practical policy, which brought Egypt to become the greatest nation, consolidating all the wealth and the power of the Egyptian pharaoh into his hands, and by default into Joseph's. And Jacob had lived in the land of Egypt 17 years by the time he was getting close to dying. Jacob had been a remarkable man in his own right. He had 12 children. He had been exiled into Assyria, on the other side, the great civilization on the other river, up north in Assyria and what is now Iraq and the Euphrates River. Jacob was very experienced in diplomacy, and he knew that this was a time for one last negotiation. He had negotiated the birthright, and his mother had given it to him over his older twin brother. He had negotiated a peace treaty with his brother Esau as he came in to the land of Israel, what would be his inheritance. He had negotiated, or he had beat the messengers or the angels of God in a fight in which he negotiated that he would receive their blessing and a new name, Israel, that he would struggle with God and would survive and would be. Jacob was cunning. He had negotiated with Lavan, his uncle, his 2 wives, and after that his entire wealth. He was able to survive a very difficult period of time when his children, Levi and Simeon, slaughtered his neighbors in punishment for them having raped Jacob's daughter Dinah and their brother and their sister. He escaped and he travelled and he negotiated and he dreamt and he buried his wife, his beloved wife, the mother of Joseph and Benjamin, on the way to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. And this is what he described to his son Joseph when he called him just before his death. And it seems that he was negotiating a deal, because he says, "If I have found favor in your eyes," which is a request before negotiation. And then he asked Joseph to put his hand on his thigh, between his thigh, a very intimate thing to do. And some say on his foreskin, the great reminder of the covenant of great promises kept between man and God. And there he swore Joseph to a great oath: "Do not bury me in Egypt." And that locks the entire story of Israel and the land of Canaan because Israel, or Jacob's name, was given to him when he entered Canaan on his way from Padan Aram in Aramea in the north. And now, coming from the south, from the other great nation, from Egypt, he would he would be recognized as Israel, and his holdings in the land of Canaan would be recognized by none other, his son, the viceroy of Egypt. So this is a negotiation over land, and this is a negotiation over title, and over burial, and over memory. And there is a lot of subtext going on between these two characters. This is a bridge from Canaan to Egypt, to the superpower, to the center of politics of the region. This is a conversation which takes place, which attests to the relationship of the people of Canaan with the people of Egypt, and the promises and the alliance, for at least that time, that Egypt had with Canaan and had with the inhabitants of Canaan, the Hebrew inhabitants of Canaan, it appears. In these two chapters is told the birthing of the nation of Israel. On one hand, Jacob from Assyria, and the other hand, getting his support from Egypt. And Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. And he was about to die. And at his death, he would have to give the epithets, the song, the blessing, the description, the story, the tales, his final orders, and his will and his testimony to his children and to his offspring. He speaks to Joseph, and he calls in Joseph's children, and he tells Joseph, these two children, Ephraim and Manasseh, they are mine. And the children that you have later, they will be yours, and they will go in, and they will be called by the names of your brothers. That you will all be one family, he's saying, and one identity. And then he goes and describes a blessing to each of his brothers, which is very mosaic. It is not propaganda. It is not complimentary. It is in many ways highly critical of his children. And these form the complexity at the base of which would be a nation.